Hi.
Hi there.
Hi, everyone.
Hey. Hello, good morning.
Hey, Chris.
Hi there.
Is that it, morning? Or evening?
Yeah, or afternoon.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
we can. Hi, Chris.
All right. So I put a note in the agenda here that we used to have that big block of everybody's name and contact info. So I just moved this out to a spreadsheet. I didn't put everybody's contact info in because I wasn't sure that everybody wanted it, like their email address, out on the internet. But I just I grabbed everybody's information from the last couple cells and just put them in here. So if you want to add your information, just add it here, and then that way we can have like one list of everybody's name and GitHub handle and email address. So hopefully this is useful to find other people in your same time zone or figure out like when some reviewer is likely to respond. I thought it was better to have them in one spot than to keep putting it in the agenda.
Nice. Thanks.
Okay. So yeah, I think we can get started. If you guys have had a chance to look at the milestones, I changed these on Monday. So basically, just like the other SIGs, we've now got one milestone for each of the 4 releases. This kind of tracks the Specs SIGs milestones, but it's only like a rough approximation. And so the first one is 2 weeks out from this Monday, right? So now a week and a day. And I put everything that was like previously spec'd for that milestone in this one, plus some extra stuff that I thought we were going to get done in time. So if there's anything that you think belongs to one of these milestones, just feel free to add it. And it's kind of arbitrary what's in 3 and 4. And I think probably as we get closer to the due dates for each of these, we can figure out what we're actually going to put in them. And then we've still got this open question. What happens at the end of the year? Do we call it a 4th alpha release, or do we call it a beta and then try and get the set of features locked down that we would actually include in the GA release next year?
Hey, so if the timeline follows the what the spec repo is doing, what about like if things are waiting on the spec?
So in that case, I think it's up to like basically everyone and all of the SIGs just to go push the spec forward.
Yeah.
Like I think at that point we have 2 options, right? It's we go ahead with the release and say do the same thing that we did with metrics for the first alpha, which is say here's a limited set of features and we're just going to release this anyway.
Got it.
Or we change the dates. We say if we want to do the same thing that the spec SIG is doing, we just move the date until when we can release the whole thing. So I think we've got a lot of flexibility up until the end of the year.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, speaking of which, Leighton, you want to talk about metrics?
Yeah, so I've been closely following the PR that Josh put up for user-facing API. I think it's really well written. Like if you guys have not sure at all about how metrics works, I really recommend reading it. It spells out a lot on how a user can create, metrics and like send like, record metrics in 3 different ways. It also outlines a lot of things that like we don't have in the SDK yet. In the API yet. It was kind of what I was waiting on. I haven't been doing much OpenTelemetry stuff this week. I was gonna wait on like until it gets approved, but it seems like the general consensus is that like we're going to be going ahead with this. They're just still fleshing out some certain details, like whether to still include deletion of like handles. So if that's the case, then I can start like implementing it already. And if there are any other major changes, then we can just iterate along the way. So.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't looked at this one at all.
Yeah, so if we could get more eyes on this and like just get this, approved, it'd be really, really helpful. Like you don't need like pretty much a lot of context from like before. Like the document is really well written. It also has 110 comments. So
yeah, in a pretty short amount of time that I got those comments too. This is
yeah.
like exactly a week old. Okay, so I see you've got 2 open metrics PRs in flight right now. What's the state of those?
Yeah, so both of them are for the for exporters for metrics, and I kind of made them because like I wanted to rush them out for the previous alpha, but it actually didn't really make sense because we didn't have a good exporter story, and we kind of still don't have a good exporter story about like how we're going to handle this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think once we get this spec merged, we can actually start talking about how like the data will be sent. In terms of the Prometheus exporter, however, I don't think we need to worry about that. I think it's just should be just a simple like data format changing kind of thing for the Prometheus exporter to be written. So
okay, so do you want reviews on these 2 PRs? Is it like 186 and 182?
I don't think it's appropriate to review them right now.
Okay.
I don't know if I should close them out because it's confusing for people. I just put them in work in progress right now.
Okay, I see. So no reviews on either one of these until like this next
Yes.
PR is up.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, so yeah, so Riley, you asked on the OpenTelemetry project page. Yeah, in the website repo, there is I'll just paste it into the doc. There's a script that just like pulls GitHub to see how many issues in each of the milestones are done, and it looks for milestones named like 02, 03, and 04. And then it just takes a percentage from like the smallest milestone or like the most recent complete milestone. So you'll see
Sure.
Python is just barely ahead of 0.01 because we have 2% of the tickets that we've assigned to the milestone done, which makes sense since I just moved all these tickets and I wouldn't have put closed tickets in the milestone. So yeah, I think this chart is very pretty, but it is not really meaningful because it says that if you have like a project with fewer tickets will have a higher percentage done. But
yeah,
I think it's fine.
You define your own bar. I see that.
Yeah, exactly. Before it said that Python was at 0.4 because we didn't have milestones that matched the other milestone names. And I had people from like Google coming up and saying, wow, Python is so far ahead. Congratulations. Oh no.
Yes.
I'll try and find it. But yeah, this is Austin Parker from Lightstep who wrote this and is doing like basically all the website maintenance, it looks like.
Yeah, I remember now. Sorry. Yeah, I can poke him if you guys want. I mean, of course, you guys can also poke him, but I can probably poke him faster.
No, I mean, I think it's fine. Like, I don't know a better way of doing this, and if we want to show like some progress when we complete these tickets, I think that works great. Although, Carlos, I got a question for you. Do you know when this thing is updated?
I think it was probably 1 month ago, at least. Probably it was like 1 month and a half.
I mean, I know the like the chart updates more frequently than that. I'm just wondering like when the chart.
Oh
gets
yeah,
updated.
you're right. Yeah. I'm just checking it now again.
But I don't think there's actually like that it takes a code commit here. I think that this is like some static page generated thing.
Yes. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, sorry. The last time I had seen this, there was no specific, there was not the details of every version. So yeah, it was changed, but it's static. Yes, I'm sure it's not code related.
Okay, cool. So the next thing I want to talk about is like the kind of like meta work in the repo that we need to get done to like fix the release process and like feel good about like our tests and everything to release the beta. And so this is kind of stuff that I want to get working before the end of the year. And I know that some of this stuff we do have ticketed, but if other people have things like they're using in other projects or that they found especially helpful, like code coverage or PyTest or whatever, I'd love to get this stuff ticketed so that we can start working on it. So like, one big obvious one is just like have automated releases. So if you create a GitHub tag, we'll push the release out. So we have some open questions about how we version each of the packages, whether we try and keep them in sync with each other, whether we keep them in sync with the like the other client libraries. And we're gonna need to solve that before the beta, definitely. But I would love to get this figured out even before the next release, just so it can be as easy as updating the changelog, pushing a git tag, and then having everything go to PyPy. So I don't think Alan Feldman, you're on the call. I don't see you in the gallery, but he has a cool solution for pushing things out using subtools SCM, which we might try to use, but then we're locked into certain version numbers if we do that. But if anybody else has like strong opinions on releasing.
No, I mean, that sounds good. We did that for open tracing for Java at least, and it was very helpful, very, very helpful this way. Yeah.
Cool.
And we are thinking about doing that, I mean, just for the record, in OpenTelemetry Java as well, but we are using SQL CI for this. Well, it should be possible to be done anyway for using Travis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have right now we're doing like one thing using the built-in GitHub workflows, which I know are still in beta, but I was gonna give it a shot and see if we could do the same thing just using GitHub.
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Okay. So besides that, we've got docs generation and the coverage checks. So Alexei, do you want to talk about the coverage check PI?
Yeah. As you can see, I answered some questions in that PI, and I see that I can't make everybody happy because now let me find Yusuke asked me if we can avoid using editable mode, and it looks like it would be much harder to avoid using editable mode. And also he asked to run tests only once, and that was how previous version of this PR was working. So I'm not sure what we want to achieve in this PR, because there are completely different opinions on how we should collect the coverage.
Okay. Yeah, so I will leave it up to Yusuke to respond to the comments here. Although Christian, looks like you got blocking comments too. Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure that like this one, because I noticed that we, while we don't have coverage, we continue to add new code that does not have tests. So I think there's a good argument for getting a version of this in that works and then taking some of the blocking comments out to separate PRs. But as long as you're not stuck waiting for feedback from Yusuke and from Christian, which it looks like maybe you are because these comments are about a week old, then I think it's fine. But I can.
Well, I tried to describe why we should use editable mode, and I also mentioned you and Christian in that comment. Did you see the?
Yeah, I
that-
see it now. I think it's probably the case in general that like we are just sometimes going to thrash on reviews where people have comments that are incompatible and it's like impossible to resolve all of them. So like I don't have an opinion on double running the tests, which looks like it's like Yusuke's big blocking comment. But yeah, I think if you and Yusuke can't come to a resolution on running this thing, like one good option is just to get all of the like any other blocking comment fixed, and then open another ticket that says try and find a way to prevent running the tests twice to get coverage that that doesn't cause like other problems. Just so we don't have this PR that is like stuck in this kind of stalemate position where if you resolve one comment, you unresolve another.
Yeah. Well, and it looks like using the PyTest is still an issue for someone.
If I remember correctly, the only comment on this one is that I don't think it's like totally required, but we're already using PyTest now as a test runner, so I think it's probably not worth blocking on this one.
Oh, maybe I missed something that was introduced this week. Let me check.
Okay. Well, in any case, we can like take this one back to GitHub. I just wanted to make sure that if you were blocked by like any particular person, we could get a chance to talk about it here.
Oh,
So,
okay.
So, Johannes, you pronounce your name Johannes or Johannes?
Johannes.
Johannes?
Yeah.
All right. So do you want to talk about the bridge before you drop off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for rescheduling the agenda for me. So the PR has been open for a while now. I got some really good points of feedback. I think I've addressed most of them by now. There is still some open stuff, but I'm on it. The biggest thing I've been doing recently was working on adding typing information, more or less to more or less everything. And for that, I needed to basically write a PEP 561 stub for open tracing because open tracing is not typed. For now, I just created it as a stub-only package under the XT package or folder. But I guess we can, if we're not releasing a new version of open tracing, then we cannot contribute it there, right? And then it has to be a standalone package that only contains typing. But yeah, I guess, we can start with kind of a package that's part of the Python of the OpenTelemetry Python library, and then we can later decide to, I don't know, manage the source somewhere else or something. It's a pretty small set of files.
Yeah, I could personally leave that as a thing to do, like an improvement, but not something we really need to do now. I think that open tracing users will not be using this checking, for now, most of them, I think. So yeah, I don't think this is very important. on that side?
Yeah, so I'm doing, just to clarify, I'm doing the absolute minimum just to get a green MyPy run so that we can basically have proper CI for the bridge as well. That's all. I'm not really investing on the open tracing side of things too much, just the minimum, the bare minimum stubs that I can, so that I can run MyPy. Other than that, let me see. Yeah, there is one. There is one pretty big technical issue that isn't addressed yet, which is saving the state of wrapper objects that are related to the currently active span, so that when someone activates a span and receives a scope and then queries for the active span, the user receives the same object, the same scope wrapper object. This is kind of tricky. There's been some nice ideas, mainly from Christian, I think. But it's not implemented yet. And this is kind of, there are to-dos in the code all over the place regarding that, and it's not resolved yet. So I guess we should decide whether we're going to wait until I manage to address that, or leave the to-dos there, merge the initial version without handling that. Because if the user isn't doing a comparison of object identity, they just check the data inside the object, like context, for example, then this is fine. We return data consistently. It's just that if you do equals, then it fails. So I don't know if this is a really big problem. And the unit tests, I could get around it by actually checking, the contents of the object and not just checking identity.
By the way, in open tracing, we don't require this, but it's an improvement that I would like to see anyway. So my take on this is that we should merge it and have either a total or a ticket for that. Because there are a couple of things to take into account that we need to discuss, when we do this. It's not so tricky because of how the open tracing API is on. So yeah, this might, take a few days to settle, and I wouldn't like to see the PR stop more time.
Yeah, I have the same feeling. And one last question on the same topic. There are still to-dos on extract and inject. I don't have a good estimation of how complicated it should be to implement these. I didn't look at this yet. So should we wait for that with merging, or also merge and open follow-up issues for inject and extract as well?
No, just open issues for following that up.
Okay, so right now we're basically logging a warning that you're using an unimplemented method, and we are doing nothing, basically. We're not breaking the code or something.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. That's it about the bridge then.
Cool. So I got one question about the bridge. Is there, and maybe this is a question for Carlos too. Do you guys have some like small example app that is already instrumented using open tracing that we could try plugging in this bridge and seeing that it maybe not exports, but
we don't. But we have a test bed suite that used to test a lot of things. Let me just quickly go check it out. This is basically a set of tests with relatively weird scenarios.
So this is like the open tracing test bed and the Java client?
That one, yes. Well, yes, this is the same for Python.
Oh, great.
Yeah, the bad thing about that is that we needed to support Tornado and G-Event and other things. So we had to have one version per each, which was painful.
Yeah, I finally read through this stuff too, like the way that you swap out the scope implementation depending on the context type.
Yeah, but this is something that is solved greatly in part with context bars, which I really appreciate. Well, I'm also hoping that G-Event will use them in the future.
Yeah. And that people upgrade to a version of Tornado that uses context bars.
Yes. But yeah,
I also included, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I also included a tiny snippet of just a few dummy lines of code with dummy instrumentation using the bridge in the description of the PR, just so that you can see that the bridge works, but I'm not testing it's not extensive in any way or comprehensive. I'm not testing strange scenarios and stuff. I'm just initializing the bridge and see that I can talk to it. Mm-hmm. And I've used the in-memory span exporter just to print stuff, basically. So no real exporter.
And also the plan is to port this testbed to test the open tracing shim itself. So yeah, we will have this.
Awesome. Okay, cool. That sounds great. And like this PR looks like it's in a really good state. So yeah, thank you, Johannes, and thank you, Carlos.
Sure.
Okay, so next thing, back up on the earlier part of the agenda. I noticed that I am spending a lot of time just fixing type errors, and a lot of these are like spurious or real, but like ultimately useless type annotations. Right now we have 3 different MyPy configs that we run as like part of the lint check. I am curious if anybody has a solution for typing that would let us do like partial type checking in the SDK and not force us to litter the code with like the type annotation comments or like the extra imports that we need to get typing to work. This is kind of an open-ended question, and I think it's probably one that's faster to talk about in person than on like something like a GitHub issue. But my impression is that typing right now is adding more detriment than benefit, and like it takes a lot of extra like work and time to add the type annotations, and it doesn't give us a whole lot because we only get this check statically, and a lot of the important like relationships between the SDK and the API, for example, are not even typed because we don't have these checks in the SDK.
Is it a general Python question? I mean, it sounds to me like this is you just more or less described how things are in the Python community, right? I mean, unless I'm not aware of something. So I mean, that's the problem, I guess, with Python typing right now. It's optional. It's only it's not really enforced. You need to run static checks to figure out things. I mean, I personally already caught like 1 or 2 small problems in the bridge, for example, while adding typing information. But for the most part, I mean, at runtime, yes, this is not enforced. So, I mean.
Well, yeah. So I think that's true. I am just complaining about the language and about the way like the static checks are just kind of slapped on afterwards.
No, but I can totally relate to that. Totally. So yeah.
So I guess the question is it worth the effort for us, like for this project? I guess that's the question, right?
Well, we do have this like particular problem that if we were only releasing something like the API package, like, or if we were like our own only consumer, then it would be easy to like just type part of the library, right? But as it is now, where we have this like this weird SDK API separation, and we want to type the API so that the types are effectively part of the documentation, but we don't necessarily want to type the whole SDK. Then we run into this problem where type checks are either they're not meaningful because we're not type checking the SDK, or it's exhausting to write them because then we have to like add it everywhere we call the API. So I think it's like also because of the structure of our project that typing becomes kind of a hassle. But I'm curious, how much time do people spend like adding the type annotations? Because like Riley, I know like I'm looking at your PRs and there's like 10 commits that all say typing.
Yeah, I probably spend 5 minutes writing code and spend a day on all to be honest. But I think like having that typing information in the API is not just going to benefit us. It's for people who consume the API package. If they use some like IDE tools, they want some auto like hint, or they want some like type checking in their project. It gives them the flexibility. Whether it's benefiting us or not, like based on my personal experience, I think I'm actually spending more than what I get.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree completely. I mean, it's exactly the same situation that I had right now with open tracing. Open tracing did not include typing info. I'm an open tracing consumer, so I need to create a stub for it. So if we don't create that for the public facing, the public APIs, then one of the first users is going to write a stub because they happen to use typing in their instrumented application. So.
Yeah. What Also, one thing that we kind of like gloss over here is that API doesn't really just mean the API, right? Like API includes internal methods and stuff that right now we end up having to annotate, even though like it doesn't actually form part of our API. And the SDK, we have things that like we really do expect people to extend, like say like the exporters, or I'm writing like the sampler PR now, and I see like all of the stuff is in the SDK, but we really do expect people to write their own samplers, right? And there's no easy way to say type check these classes and don't type check these classes. So I'm wondering if there's like, if people have seen some solution, like you annotate every class that you expect people to consume and then only type check those annotated classes or something, or if there's like any nice solution here.
I think probably one option is to split the file. So put all the things that you want people to consume in a separate folder or separate file, as long as we don't mess up the module hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
However, from the side, I think there are like different personas. One is the end customer who has no idea about how OpenTelemetry project works or who we are. They just take this SDK or API and instrument their stuff, and they follow the document. They don't want to look at our code. And the second category is developer who want to do extension development, or they want to develop exporters. For these guys, I think they have a paid job to do this. And if it sucks, like they don't have this auto completion from the IDE, those things, they wouldn't complain. So I treat these developers similar like me. So we're in the same situation. We're the developers that contribute to the OpenTelemetry project. And with this, we spend some time on the typing, and also we get something. In this case, I feel like probably we're spending more than what we get. And if I'm the exporter developer, I don't know OpenTelemetry, probably I will be fine without typing, because this is a one-time job. But for like, we expect there are a lot of people going to use OpenTelemetry Python to instrument their code without having to understand how we work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you expect that that vendors are not getting as much benefit as app developers?
So it's like 10 people from our side spending additional time making the typing work. We suffer from that, but we give the benefit to majority of the users. That makes sense. But if like 10 of us spending like a day just entertaining ourselves, that seems like a losing battle for me.
Okay, so this to me sounds like an argument for, yeah, like coming up with a package structure that separates the vendor-facing API and the user-facing API, and then like having good documentation and type checks for one and not really the other, or rather to like separate these in a way that instead of both people reading both sets of documentation, we have like different docs for different users.
Yeah,
and maybe that'll inform the package structure too. I think this is like especially going to come up as we start working on the metrics exporters, because this is I think the best example of a API in the SDK. So probably, when we start doing that, and it's like Leighton, it sounds like this is going to be like this week when we get this like Josh's PR in.
Yep.
We're going to have to like figure this out.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, so I think there's still a lot of work for us to do here. And if people like work on other projects and see that they have a good solution to typing, or like even if you just come up with like a better workflow for working with types, I think everybody would be interested to hear it. Are you guys using something like VS Code that actually uses the type annotations in the editor?
I use VS Code, but I don't use any plugins, because sometimes they cause trouble for me. So I just use it as a big editor.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know, like from VS Code side, there's a direction. They want to give those features by default. So they want to force people like me to do typing without my approval.
Yeah, I don't have a solution for this either. I'm just, I run my Python command line and then load it in like Vim's quick fix list and then just go through and fix a bunch of stuff. But
I think sooner or later, like when people install VS Code and they work with Python, by default, they will have a like advertisement telling you, hey, do you want to install these plugins? And there's only one button, yes.
okay, so one thing that because I was just looking at the double underscore all special attribute that we got in a bunch of init files. I noticed that like basically there are two ways we could structure this project, right? One is that we have top level init files that expose all of the attributes like classes and modules or whatever that we expect to be in the API, but then we put them anywhere else we want in the package, or we put just everything in like the files that make sense to us, and then people have to use those import paths. The reason this comes up now is that like if you look at some of the init files that import things from their sub packages, then we get two possible import paths for those objects or for those classes. And right now we're using both import paths, right? So I am curious to see what people think about this, if we should have like a canonical API style import path for each class that we think is part of the API, or if we should say use whatever is convenient.
When you say multiple import paths, you mean like to get to the, I guess, the child or the subclass, it's like you can either directly import the subclass or like you import the parent and then it's like dot
the
subclass?
So let's say you've got like, you have OpenTelemetry.trace, right?
Yeah.
And then under that you have the status module, right? Mm-hmm. And then status has like a code class. So you can say OpenTelemetry.trace.status.code, or if you import it from like the trace init file, you can say
got it, yeah,
trace.code.
Okay. Yeah.
And right now it seems like we're doing both. Right.
Right.
And this to me looks like pretty dangerous, because it looks like we're consuming our public API in the private implementation, and it means that we can't change the API without breaking ourselves. But it's also not clear to me that it's worth maintaining a separate like public API for this stuff, because Python doesn't really give you the option of hiding the implementation anyway.
Mm-hmm. And so the first way that you mentioned, right, we just import like everything in one of the init files, and the init file would specify all of the modules that it needs in the all clause, yeah, exactly. I guess. Okay, and then everything within the all can exist wherever they want, pretty much.
Yeah, so my suggestion, take context, for example. I just listed some like examples in the chat window. I think, for example, if we want people to use this like capitalized context, it should be within the top level package. So it's OpenTelemetry.context namespace, instead of having to expose the implementation detail. In this case, like the reason to put all here is with this module, all represents all the interface that we expose to the customers. If they try to explore the folder hierarchy and try to import something directly, we can break them at any time we want. So the only interface is at the top level.
Yeah, I think, yeah, having the interface at the top level sounds the right choice for me.
Okay, so if we do this, we run into a couple other problems. One is that we have to decide whether we ourselves always use the top level definitions when we're importing things. And the other is that it makes it impossible for us to do imports like up the package hierarchy, right? Because then we have a circular import. And so it means we have to structure the project differently.
I think for the first question, if it is within the same package, for example, within the API package, you can either import, for example, this base context. I can share my screen. Let me know when you can see it. In this way, I feel like this base context is the implementation detail. If I could rename this to like Riley context, then people shouldn't be affected. And if they want to explore this base context and import directly from their code, it's their problem. In this way, I wonder, like, probably it even makes sense to make a like underscore at the beginning of the folder, like from this under. Although I haven't seen this practice in Python, but I think that's technically possible. But basically, these things are not considered as public interface. And because this is within package, so I think the developer has a flexibility to either like import that directly from like the implementation detail, like here you put the base context, or you can roll to the public interface, import from this package. It doesn't matter. So if for example, if there's another like code in the API, which, for example, metrics, they can import directly from this like context.base context, or they can import from context. We don't care because this is the same package. We're not going to release them separately. But from the SDK, I don't expect the SDK to import from OpenTelemetry.context.base context because this breaks the package level contract. They don't want to see the detail of that package. This is implementation freedom of the individual package. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think what's going to happen though, as if we try and like be principled about this and expose everything that we consider part of the public API in these like top level init packages, it's going to get really hard to come up with a package structure that like doesn't give us import errors. So I think it may be worth doing.
Yeah. And for example, like when I think about circular reference wouldn't happen between the API and SDK or between any two packages, right? It can only happen within the same package.
Right.
In this way, we give people freedom. You import from whichever path you feel convenient. And the first priority is to avoid circular reference.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good argument for, say, like inside the same package, only using the internal paths, and then externally using the external path. But I think the circular reference will come from like even just like importing the class at the top level, right? Not trying to use it from another module inside the same package.
Can you give one example? I think like from what I've seen, like if like within the same package, you got several folders and they got subfolders. And normally I would expect if a folder is trying, like some file in the folder is trying to import stuff from its like brothers or sisters, they can just use this dot instead of importing from the parent folder.
Yeah, I can maybe just like comment on the PR I'm working on because I think this will probably take more time than we have here. But the thing that I'm seeing now is I like have a separate sampling sub package as part of trace, and I want to import the entire sampling like sub package in traces init so that you can reference it as like trace.sampling. But I also need to do like the reverse import.
I see.
To pick up things from trace base. So I think it's possible to fix this by like structuring the project differently, but it might mean some like real like invasive restructuring.
Yeah.
So
there's a PR you can ping me. I can take a look and share some of my understanding.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, Diego points out that we can also like just hide our own internal classes by giving them underscore names and then re-importing them without the underscores, which is true, but I think it's possibly makes things a little bit difficult to read, and yeah, I don't know. It's the kind of convention that we would like need to adopt everywhere.
So it depends. For example, if you have a file where you have 100 things and only one thing that you don't want to export, then probably it's more convenient to make an underscore. However, if you have like a file with 99 things that you don't want to export, then having that O, this is the power from Python that gives you a better control. And also that O gives a benefit. I've seen like in like big teams where you have a lot of developers contributing, and some people will have different relational beliefs. So they introduce some new classes, and having that all will prevent accidental leak of a public interface. To give people freedom, you can introduce your own helper class. But if people want to expose that, they have to modify, oh, this is a red sign. And people, this is very explicit. And during code review, people can say, oh, this PR, you're trying to expose something new. So having that always somewhat like helpful in this case. It's depending on the team size. Like I think here we got a relatively small team. If like we got 100 people in the community and 10 folks have the power to approve and merge anything, then we probably will go with all. For now, I don't see a strong reason. So I'm fine with either side.
Yeah, I think there's like a pretty good argument in general for sticking to conventions that are like obvious to developers coming from the outside, so that like people can still read the source code and not be like very surprised about, say, how you'll import things. And I think we also have like we see this with like properties and public attributes now, where because we don't have a single standard way of doing it, and we don't like write this anywhere, what we have is like a mix of styles, which is worse than if we had picked either one, right?
Yeah,
so I worry about doing this halfway and hiding some things, but then having a bunch of classes that aren't part of the public API that don't start with underscores.
It's diversity.
Yeah, we need more authoritarian rule in the Python SIG. Yeah, nominate Riley as dictator. All right, so I think we can skip error handling for now, because this is kind of just a open question about like where we want to catch errors. Just to mention it quickly, I think probably it makes sense for us to have something that looks like an exception handler, like our own bit of code that says like throw, but it's like utilities.throw or something. And instead of actually throwing, it only throws if you have like the test setting enabled. And if you don't, then it just logs an error. But I think that will probably be better explained in a separate PR. So we talked about the bridge, and okay. Whose item is this under MISC? Canonical status codes?
That's mine. Yes. Hey, sorry. Yes, I came too late for reviewing that ticket. But yeah, I was wondering. It's a very specific technical question, and it felt correct to ask here instead of going and comment on the closed PR. Yeah. So in Java, we have both canonical status codes, and we have like built-in values for both of them. So you don't have to, just go and create a new status object. You just go and use, the okay one. So I wonder if there's a reason to not have that in place.
It sounds like, oh god.
What's the difference between a status code and a canonical status code?
So the canonical status code is just like the code, like just an int or a number, and status is like trying to join that with a description. So the idea is that when you have, of course, you have built-in canonical status codes, so it's fine. And then when you have the status codes, which grabs or contains both a canonical status codes plus a description, then you offer some built-in values that default to every canonical status code plus no description. So if there was no specific reason to not do that, I can craft a PR for adding that.
Yeah, this is the way that I actually expected this would have been implemented. I think Christian was the one arguing for like making every status have a separate description, and then like having different instances for the statuses you return. So to me that sounds great, but I think you might want to take that up with Christian.
Okay, yeah, so it sounds like I will be doing a PR then, because, I could imagine that we want to give users flexibility to just specify status code like we know description, so just go fast instead of forcing them to have something, like a description. But yeah, I will create a PR and then I will just go with it. And it was a similar question with status, not having a default, with having a default value to OK, which I think doesn't read well. Like you're creating a status code and then you are passing no value and it defaults to OK. But anyway, probably this can be improved by the previous point. So anyway, I will create a PR and then I will discuss with Christian on the specific details.
Okay, cool. I put a link here to Lightstep's blog posts, which just coincidentally I kind of stumbled on while writing the agenda updates. So I just thought that was a neat thing to call out. If you haven't looked at their blog, go check out the blog. They're adding a lot of, looks like pretty good content. And then
noticed that Ted joined the meeting. So is there something?
I think this is Ted's item at the end here, right?
Hey, yeah, I popped in. We're moving on to the 0.3 spec work, and some of it is like a little invasive. In particular, a thing I've been working on is like trying to separate out context propagation and baggage from tracing. Right now, they're all kind of glued together. I think that would be great if we could pull it off. There's always been interest in having context propagation being separate. My concern is that this is something that may have some tricky consequences if we actually do it. And I don't want to wait to go through a whole spec process before trying to work those out. I feel like much like with name tracers, in fact, and this interacts with name tracers, that we're moving on to kind of like new work. And if you spec it out in English, what happens is you go to implement it and you've now suddenly realize there's like a bunch of unanswered questions you have to deal with. And if you prototype it just in Java, then you end up with this spec that's just like totally overprescribed for Java. Since I think this would be an important issue to do, I think it would be great to start prototyping this stuff a bit in at least a couple of languages so that there are people from a couple of SIGs who have their head wrapped around this problem, so that we can either move forward with it quickly or decide that this is just going to be crazy town and kind of like abort the effort before it gets into the spec. So I'm going around to the different SIGs just to check and see if there's anyone interested in working on this particular issue. And also in general, maybe bring up the comment of like, should we be doing more prototyping or spiking while doing some of this remaining spec work? I think this was an issue with name tracers where it got all the way into the spec before anyone really started kind of hacking on it and thinking about the implications.
I'm interested in this. I know that I'm overdue to look at this, your OTEP PR too. I also think that Yusuke will be really interested in this one, but he's not on the call now, but he's probably the right person to talk to about this since he did like a bunch of the propagation work for us.
Yeah, and me too. So Yusuke and I were working on the context part.
Great.
So we're all interested. This is one of the critical pieces why we have open telemetry. So
it's so critical, right?
We're not here.
I'm glad people are interested, but I do think there's like implications that might actually really change some things. Hopefully not dramatically, but it certainly interacts with some critical components, especially around things like context switching, which right now are very span centric. And I think that's it's just going to be a question of like what it looks like. So if there's people interested, I don't know, we can form like maybe just a working group on this particular issue from some people from a couple different languages, just to make sure we have like a fast moving discussion on this. So maybe I'll form a channel on this that we can all join. That seemed like that was working for the metrics people. So great, I'm glad to hear there's interest.
Yeah, thanks for coming and pushing people to look at it.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for the blog shout out. Okay, yeah, that's what I got.
All right. Anybody have anything else they want to talk about in the Python client?
Well, we have 3 minutes, so yeah.
What does that mean? We can end early and get a full 3 minutes back?
No. It means that like if somebody has a big question, now is the time. Like don't postpone it. Don't wait for the end.
Is anybody blocked on anything? I see we've got a couple open PRs, but I don't know that like that is clear like why they're blocked. Like code coverage and metrics seems to be the big ones, and we already talked about those. Okay, so maybe last thing is what are people currently working on, just so we're not stepping on each other's toes. I am going to try and get a sampler PR out today that implements the first half of the sampler changes.
Oh, that's very nice. Actually, I had forgotten to fill an issue for that, so thank you. Yeah.
Also on that, if people see issues that don't exist and they're like interested in particular, like it's possible that I left some out of the milestone, so it's mostly just moving existing issues. So especially if you're working on another language and you see something that like is taking a lot of time in another language, like it'd be really useful to have a ticket.
Yep.
But no, it sounds like it's it. So
well, can I ask Carlos directly?
Sure.
Yeah, Carlos. Thank you for your work on Python Flask project in open tracing contrib.
In open tracing, yeah. Oh, yeah. I saw.
I'd like to ask you to release a new version, since the previous one version was released last year, and it's pinned to it required some pinned version of open tracing. I'm not sure exactly what package, but it calls.
Sure. I didn't write that one, but I will investigate so I can release maximum by the end of this weekend, because I think somebody asked for that already. I will figure out who wrote that, who has the credentials, and then we will publish it.
It would be really great. Thank you.
Perfect.
I think that's it. See everybody next week.
Okay, thank you guys.
See you guys.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.